A promising young student. A trusted spiritual leader. And a series of chilling text messages that would reveal a dark and sinister truth but ended in a cold-blooded murder. At first glance, this story looks like one you might scroll past without a second thought, a missing persons case, another tragedy in a world full of them. But the deeper you look, the more unsettling it becomes. This wasn't just any disappearance. It was a slow, calculated betrayal, hiding in plain sight, waiting to explode. What started as spiritual guidance ended in something far more disturbing, a twisted game of power, obsession, and control, played behind the walls of a place meant to offer salvation. The kind of betrayal that sends shivers down your spine. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about trust. Jasmine Walker was 24 years old. Bright. Driven. Full of life. The kind of person you'd meet once and never forget. She had dreams, ambitions, a future so full of promise. She worked hard, she loved deeply, and she believed in people. That belief. It was her greatest strength, and ultimately, her downfall. Her friends say she was kind. Gentle. Maybe a little too trusting. Maybe a little too eager to see the good in others. And one of those people she trusted the most. Her pastor. Pastor Daniel Whitaker. A man of faith. A man of wisdom. A man who preached about light and redemption, while hiding something sinister beneath the surface. At first, it was just small things, odd messages, late-night calls, whispers that didn't quite sit right. But when Jasmine confided in a friend that she was scared, that something felt off. No one could have imagined just how horrifying her final hours would be. She sent a text before she vanished. A text that now haunts everyone who reads it. Something feels off. If I don't come back, tell someone. And then, silence. No more texts. No more calls. Just an empty space where a bright young woman once was. Her family begged for answers. Authorities searched. The community prayed. But what they uncovered was far more shocking than anyone could have prepared for. Because behind the closed doors of New Light Community Church, behind the pulpit where he once preached about righteousness, was a secret so dark, so twisted, that it would leave an entire town in disbelief. What really happened to Jasmine Walker? How did a trusted spiritual leader become the prime suspect in her murder? And what did those chilling, hidden text messages reveal? Tonight, we unravel the case that shook an entire community to its core. If you love deep dives into true crime cases, make sure you subscribe to Shocking True Crime Exposed. We uncover the darkest stories that others are afraid to tell. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get into this chilling case. Jasmine Walker was just 24 years old. A college student, a daughter, a friend. A young woman who had her entire life ahead of her. She was the kind of person people naturally gravitated toward, kind, soft-spoken, but strong-willed. She had a way of making everyone feel seen, as if their problems were just as important as her own. Her friends described her as the glue that held everyone together, the one who always picked up the phone, no matter the time, no matter the reason. Jasmine grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, the youngest of 3 siblings. Her family was tight-knit, deeply rooted in faith. Church wasn't just something they did on Sundays, it was part of their identity, woven into the fabric of their everyday lives. From a young age, Jasmine was drawn to it, not just for the rituals or the sermons, but for the sense of belonging it gave her. Her faith was personal. It wasn't about following rules or memorizing verses, it was about connection. About finding purpose. That's what led her to New Light Community Church, a place that, for a time, felt like home. Jasmine was ambitious. She was studying social work at a local university, determined to help young women who had gone through difficult situations. She had seen too many stories of abuse, manipulation, and silence, and she wanted to be the person who broke the cycle for someone else. Her life wasn't perfect, no one's is. She had struggles, doubts, moments of insecurity. But she was trying. She was building a future for herself, one step at a time. And then, she met Pastor Daniel Whitaker. At first, it seemed like a blessing. He was a mentor, a guide. Someone who saw her potential, who encouraged her in her faith, who told her that she was meant for something greater. She trusted him. And in the end, that trust cost her everything. To the outside world, Pastor Daniel Whitaker was a man of faith. A leader. A respected figure in the community. He wasn't the loud, charismatic type of preacher that packed megachurches with thousands of followers. No, he was different. More soft-spoken, reserved, intellectual. He had a way of making people feel like they were the only ones in the room when he spoke to them. Like he understood their struggles in a way no one else did. And that's what made him so dangerous. For years, Pastor Whitaker had built a reputation as a spiritual counselor, someone people, especially young women, turned to for guidance. He framed it as mentorship, as helping them navigate their faith and personal challenges. But there were whispers. Small, fleeting rumors that never seemed to stick. Stories of inappropriate conversations. Of young women who felt uneasy around him but couldn't quite explain why. Of a pastor who seemed to get too close, too personal, too invested in the private lives of his congregation. But no one suspected he was capable of murder. He was, after all, a man of God. A husband. A father. Someone who had spent decades building his church, earning the trust of his congregation. And yet, behind closed doors, there was a side of him no one saw. A man consumed by power and control. A man whose true nature would only come to light after it was too late. Jasmine's disappearance sent shockwaves through her family. Her mother, Evelyn Walker, was the first to sound the alarm. She knew her daughter. Knew her habits. Knew that she would never just disappear without a word. Her best friend, Sierra Adams, was the last person to hear from her before she vanished. She still remembers the final text, the one that felt off, the one that made her stomach twist, the one she wished she had acted on sooner. Her older brother, Marcus Walker, was the one who went to the police. The one who pushed when others hesitated. The one who refused to accept the idea that Jasmine had just walked away. For them, this wasn't just a crime story. This was their reality. Their worst nightmare come to life. At first, the police treated Jasmine's case like any other missing persons report. They asked the usual questions: did she have problems at home? A history of mental illness? Was she involved with someone who might have wanted to harm her? But as the days passed, as the evidence began to surface, it became clear that this was not just another case. Detective Ryan Carter, the lead investigator, described it as one of the most disturbing cases he had ever worked on. Not just because of the crime itself, but because of how well the perpetrator had hidden in plain sight. And then, there was District Attorney Lauren Bennett, the woman who would eventually prosecute Pastor Whitaker. A seasoned lawyer who had seen some of the worst crimes imaginable. But even she admitted, in a later interview, that this case haunted her. Because this wasn't just about one victim. This was about a pattern. When news of Pastor Whitaker's involvement in Jasmine's disappearance first broke, no one wanted to believe it. Church members defended him. They called it a misunderstanding, a mistake, an attack on a good man. He would never do something like this. He's dedicated his life to serving God. This is just the devil trying to destroy a righteous man. But as the evidence came out, as the texts, the messages, the digital footprints he thought he had erased began to surface, the community was forced to confront an unbearable truth. The man they had trusted with their souls had been hiding something monstrous. And Jasmine? She had paid the ultimate price. What happens next in this story is even more chilling. The crime itself. The investigation. The trial. The horrifying truth behind what really happened to Jasmine Walker. Stay with me. Because what we uncover next will leave you speechless. Before she became a headline, before her name was whispered in hushed conversations, before the search parties and the breaking news alerts, Jasmine Walker was just a 24-year-old woman trying to figure out life. She was like so many young women her age, busy, ambitious, always on the move. Balancing school, work, friendships, and faith. Her days had a comforting rhythm to them. Most mornings, Jasmine's alarm would go off at 6:30 a.m. She wasn't really a morning person, but she had learned to push through. A quick shower, a cup of coffee, and then she was out the door, heading to her university. She was in her final year of college, studying social work, a field she was passionate about. She had this deep need to help others, to be a voice for people who felt unheard. Maybe because, growing up, she had seen too many women suffer in silence, trapped in cycles of abuse, fear, and shame. She wanted to be someone who could break that pattern. After classes, she worked part-time at a local women's shelter, helping women who had nowhere else to turn. It wasn't easy work. Some nights, she went home exhausted, emotionally drained from hearing stories that broke her heart. But she never let it show. She always told herself, if I can help just one person, it's worth it. And when the weight of it all became too much, she turned to her faith. Jasmine had always been devout, but it wasn't until she started attending New Light Community Church that she truly felt a sense of spiritual belonging. Pastor Whitaker had a way of making Jasmine feel special. He told her she had a unique gift, that God was preparing her for something important. And to fulfill that purpose, she needed to remove distractions. Slowly, she started pulling away from her friends. Canceling plans. Saying she was too busy with her studies, with church work, with her spiritual growth. Her best friend, Sierra Adams, remembers the shift vividly. It wasn't like her, Sierra would later say. Jasmine was always so outgoing, so full of life. But then, it was like she was disappearing. Every time I tried to get her to hang out, she'd say she had church stuff. Bible study. Counseling sessions. Something always came up. The late-night messages. And by the time people started truly paying attention, it was already too late. Then came the night Jasmine sent that final text. The message that would haunt her best friend forever. Something feels off. If I don't come back, tell someone. And just like that, she was gone. At the time, no one could have imagined the horrifying truth behind what happened next. But as the investigation unfolded, the real nightmare began. At first, the messages seemed normal. Encouraging. Thoughtful. Exactly the kind of texts you'd expect from a pastor. Stay strong in your faith. I see great things in your future. God has placed something special inside you. But then, they changed. They became more personal. I feel like God has connected us for a reason. You can always talk to me about anything, anything at all. I worry about you, Jasmine. There are people who don't understand your path. They'll try to pull you away. But I won't let them. It was subtle at first. A slow shift in tone. A blurring of boundaries between spiritual guidance and something much darker. Jasmine didn't know how to respond. This was a man she trusted. A man of God. She told herself she was reading too much into it. That maybe she was just overthinking things. But deep down, she felt it. That uneasy, creeping feeling in her stomach. Something was off. And she wasn't the only one who noticed. One night, as she sat on her bed, staring at yet another message from Pastor Daniel Whitaker, she finally broke down and told her best friend, Sierra Adams. I don't know what to do, Jasmine whispered. It's like, I don't know if I'm imagining things or if this is actually happening. Sierra listened as Jasmine described the messages, the strange tension, the feeling of being watched. "You need to tell someone," Sierra said. "Who?" Jasmine whispered. "Who's going to believe me? It's Pastor Whitaker. He's like family. And if I'm wrong, I'll look crazy." And that was the problem. She wasn't sure if what she was feeling was real. She felt trapped, like she was spiraling, doubting her own instincts. And that's exactly what predators count on. That hesitation. That self-doubt. It was the perfect cover. Then came the night everything changed. Jasmine told Sierra she was going to meet Pastor Whitaker for a private discussion. Late at night. At the church. Alone. "You sure that's a good idea?" Sierra asked. "Why does he want to meet you this late?" "He said it's important," Jasmine replied. "Something about my faith, my future. He said he could help me figure things out." "Jasmine. I don't know. Something about this doesn't sit right with me." Jasmine hesitated. And then she did something that would later haunt Sierra forever. She forced a smile. Laughed it off. "It's fine," she said. "I'll text you when I'm home." And she walked out the door. The last known footage of Jasmine Walker came from a gas station security camera at 9:47 p.m. She had stopped to fill up her car, wearing a simple hoodie and jeans. She looked normal. Calm. Just another young woman running errands. She had no idea that, within hours, she would vanish. There was another camera. A traffic camera near New Light Community Church, capturing a grainy image of her car pulling into the empty parking lot. But there was no footage of her leaving. At 10:21 p.m., Sierra's phone buzzed. It was a text from Jasmine. Short. Chilling. "Something feels off. If I don't come back, tell someone." Sierra stared at the message, her heart pounding. She immediately called Jasmine. No answer. She texted back, "What's wrong? Where are you?" Nothing. The three little dots appeared. Then disappeared. Jasmine was gone. Hours passed. Then a full night. Then a day. No one could reach Jasmine. Her mother called. No answer. Her brother, Marcus, texted her, assuming she was just busy with school. But when she didn't show up for work the next morning, the sinking feeling turned into full-blown panic. She wasn't just ignoring messages. She was missing. And soon, the horrifying truth would come to light. Because Jasmine didn't just disappear. She was silenced. And the man everyone trusted, knew exactly where she was. What happened to Jasmine? Where did she go? And why was Pastor Daniel Whitaker suddenly acting so nervous? Stay with me. Because what happens next will shake you to your core. Jasmine never returned home. By morning, her mother, Evelyn Walker, was pacing the kitchen, her phone gripped so tightly in her hands that her knuckles were white. Her daughter had never stayed out all night without telling her. Never. She called. No answer. Texted. No response. She checked Jasmine's social media, nothing new posted. At first, she tried to stay calm. Maybe Jasmine had fallen asleep at a friend's house. Maybe she had an early class or work shift and forgot to check her phone. But as the hours stretched on, panic settled in. By noon, her family knew something was wrong. Her brother, Marcus Walker, started making calls, to friends, to co-workers, to anyone who might have seen her. Hey, have you heard from Jasmine? She didn't come home last night. One by one, the answers came back. No. 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 And then Sierra. She sent me a weird text last night. Said something felt off. That if she didn't come back, I should tell someone. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Jasmine hadn't just forgotten to come home. She had been afraid. By that evening, Jasmine's family filed a missing persons report. But as with so many cases like this, the initial response from law enforcement was frustrating. She's an adult, they said. Maybe she needed some time alone. Maybe she'll turn up in a day or two. But her family knew better. Jasmine wasn't the type to just vanish. She had work. Classes. Responsibilities. If she was going to disappear, she would have told someone. And so, they didn't wait. Friends and family started searching on their own. They called hospitals. Checked with mutual friends. Drove through town, replaying her last known movements. They retraced her steps. The gas station. The last confirmed sighting. The drive toward New Light Community Church. Where she told Sierra she was going. But no sign of Jasmine. Then came the first real clue. 2 days after she vanished, a local maintenance worker found something strange in a drainage ditch, a cell phone, face down, covered in dirt and leaves. It was Jasmine's. The screen was cracked. The battery was dead. But when law enforcement took it in, they found something chilling. Dozens of unread messages. From her mother, Jasmine, please call me. From Marcus, where are you? From Sierra, Jazz, I'm freaking out, please just text me back. And the last one sent to her, Jasmine, I'm getting worried. Please tell me you're okay. She had never read them. It was as if, the moment she sent that eerie last text to Sierra, she never touched her phone again. That meant whatever happened to Jasmine, happened fast. She had been in distress. She had been scared. And then. Silence. When detectives got access to Jasmine's phone records, something stood out immediately. Where was Pastor Whitaker between 10:30 p.m. and 2 a.m.? And more importantly, what happened to Jasmine Walker during those missing hours? By now, the once untouchable pastor was starting to sweat. His congregation was starting to whisper. His story wasn't making sense. And then, investigators found something else. Buried deep within Jasmine's phone data, in a folder most people wouldn't think to check, was a message she had typed but never sent. It was a draft. Unfinished. But enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. I don't know what to do. He's acting different. I feel like something bad is going to happen. She had typed those words. She had felt it coming. And now. She was gone. What happened inside that church? Where was Jasmine? And why was Pastor Whitaker so desperate to cover his tracks? The investigation was about to take a dark and twisted turn. And the truth would be even worse than anyone imagined. Stay with me. Because what you're about to hear will haunt you. For days, the search for Jasmine Walker continued. Her family clung to hope, even as the growing evidence whispered a different reality. Flyers were posted. Volunteers combed through wooded areas, ditches, and abandoned buildings. The church parking lot was searched again and again, but there was nothing. Then, on the 6th day, a call came in. A jogger running near a rural creek bed, just 5 miles from the church, noticed something strange, a piece of fabric tangled in the brush near the water. It was torn, dirty, half hidden beneath the damp earth. They moved closer. And that's when they saw it. A hand. Partially buried. Pale. Lifeless. It didn't take long to confirm what they already knew. It was Jasmine. Jasmine Walker hadn't just died. She had been brutalized. The autopsy confirmed what detectives had feared the most: this wasn't a random attack. This was personal. Cause of death, asphyxiation. She had been strangled. Blunt force trauma, multiple bruises along her face and ribs. Defensive wounds, scratches and broken nails, she had fought back. Time of death, estimated between 10:30 p.m. to 12 a.m., the exact window Pastor Whitaker couldn't account for. But the most disturbing detail? She had been moved. Someone had tried to cover it up. To make sure she wasn't found. And the evidence? It led right back to Pastor Daniel Whitaker. Detectives seized Pastor Whitaker's phone and dug deep into his records. What they found was sickening. For months, he had been in constant contact with Jasmine. Texts, calls, late-night conversations. Some of the messages were encouraging, fatherly, religious. But others? Crossed every possible boundary. You're special, Jasmine. God brought you to me for a reason. I worry about you. You need to be careful who you trust. I feel like you're slipping away from me. It was obsessive. Controlling. Then, there was the deleted data. A forensic team recovered erased messages from the night Jasmine disappeared. Messages he thought were gone forever. 10:14 p.m., we need to talk in person. This is important. 10:19 p.m., I don't want you to make a mistake. Come inside. 10:27 p.m., you can't just walk away from this, Jasmine. And then, after that? Nothing. Not a single text or call from him, until the next morning. When he texted Jasmine as if nothing had happened. Where are you? I'm worried. People are asking questions. Call me as soon as you get this. Jasmine, your mother is looking for you. Please, let me know you're okay. It was staged. A performance. He knew exactly where she was. Because he had put her there. Then, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. A church maintenance worker, who usually kept quiet, came forward. He had been outside the church that night, locking up around 11 p.m. And he saw something. A figure. Moving near the back entrance, where the security cameras didn't reach. He didn't think much of it at the time. But now. He was sure. It was Pastor Whitaker. Not only that. But he noticed something else. There was a car. Jasmine's car. Still parked in the same spot from earlier. But by morning, it was gone. And who had the keys? Pastor Whitaker. So, what drove a pastor, a man of faith, a supposed pillar of the community to murder Jasmine Walker? The answer? Control. This wasn't a case of a random attack. This was calculated. For months, Pastor Whitaker had been grooming Jasmine. Testing her boundaries. Seeing how much power he had over her. And at some point, she saw it. She realized what he was doing. And she wanted out. That was the breaking point. Because Pastor Whitaker wasn't just a manipulator. He was a predator. And when Jasmine started pulling away, when she questioned him, when she finally saw him for what he was, he knew he was losing control. And if there was one thing he couldn't handle, it was losing control. She had become a threat. If she spoke out, his entire world would crumble. The reputation. The power. The illusion of the beloved pastor. And so, on that cold night in the church, when Jasmine stood her ground and tried to leave, he snapped. What happened next? Was pure rage. He grabbed her. Pushed her against the wall. She fought back. Hard. That's where the bruises and defensive wounds came from. But he was bigger. Stronger. More violent than she ever could have imagined. He wrapped his hands around her throat. And he squeezed. Until her body stopped moving. Until her last breath was gone. Until the threat was eliminated. And then. He cleaned up. He erased messages. He moved her car. And finally, under the cover of darkness, he dragged her lifeless body into his car and drove 5 miles away, to a secluded area where no one would find her. Except someone did. And now, his secrets were out. His mask was slipping. And soon, he would no longer be the man people worshipped. He would be something else entirely. A murderer. With mounting evidence against him, DNA, digital footprints, a crumbling alibi, the walls were closing in. The congregation that once defended him was starting to whisper. And law enforcement? They were ready to make their move. Because the next time Pastor Whitaker stepped into that church, he wouldn't be standing behind the pulpit. He would be in handcuffs. What happens next? The arrest. The trial. The final moments where Jasmine's family comes face to face with her killer. Justice is coming. But would it be enough? Stay with me. Because this case is far from over. For weeks, Pastor Daniel Whitaker continued to preach. He stood at the pulpit, delivering sermons, looking into the eyes of his congregation as if nothing had happened. As if Jasmine Walker hadn't fought for her life in that very church. As if her body hadn't been found half buried near a creek, miles from where she was last seen alive. But law enforcement had him in their sights. With Jasmine's phone records, surveillance footage, his suspicious alibi, and the forensic evidence from her body, detectives knew they had enough to move in. And so, one Sunday morning, as he prepared to deliver his sermon, they came for him. He had just finished greeting members of the congregation when police stormed through the church doors. The room fell silent. Gasps. Whispers. Handcuffs clicking around his wrists. Pastor Whitaker, you're under arrest for the murder of Jasmine Walker. A woman in the front row screamed. An older man shook his head in disbelief. Some cried. Others prayed. But some refused to believe it. This is a mistake, a woman yelled. This is an attack on a man of God. Satan is trying to destroy his ministry. Even as he was led out of the church, placed into the back of a police car, and driven away, some of his most devoted followers stood by him. They refused to accept that the man they had trusted for years could be a murderer. But the evidence would tell a different story. At first, Whitaker was calm. Collected. His lawyer sat beside him as detectives laid out what they knew. Jasmine's last known location. The church. The deleted texts. Found in his phone records. His shaky alibi. His own wife couldn't confirm when he got home that night. The physical evidence. Fibers from his carpet found on Jasmine's clothing. Pastor, the evidence is overwhelming. You were the last person to see her alive. Still, he denied everything. I would never hurt Jasmine. She was like a daughter to me. This is a terrible misunderstanding. Then explain why your deleted messages to her sound like someone trying to control her. Why did she text her friend saying she was afraid? He had no answer. Instead, he shook his head, playing the victim. I'm being framed. People want to ruin me. You don't understand what it means to be a spiritual leader. When you guide people, some of them twist things. They become obsessed. Maybe Jasmine was unstable. Maybe she ran into trouble after she left. Detectives stared at him. Cold. Unmoved. She didn't leave, Pastor. We both know that. That was the moment his mask began to slip. He shifted in his seat. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped the table. For the first time. He looked nervous. But he refused to confess. And so, the case moved forward. Straight into the courtroom. The trial of Pastor Daniel Whitaker was one of the most shocking in recent history. People packed the courtroom every single day. Reporters fought for a seat. Jasmine's family sat in the front row, eyes red, hearts heavy. And when the prosecution stood to lay out the case against him, the truth unraveled. The prosecution's case, the damning evidence. The district attorney, Lauren Bennett, was sharp, relentless, and unforgiving. This case is about trust. A young woman trusted her pastor, trusted him to guide her, to protect her. Instead, he preyed on that trust. And when she finally saw through him, when she realized what he was, he silenced her. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence. The deleted text messages, messages that showed obsession, control, and manipulation. The church security footage, Jasmine was seen arriving, but never leaving. The physical evidence, carpet fibers from Whitaker's office were found on Jasmine's hoodie. The pastor's lies, his alibi didn't hold up. His wife's testimony contradicted him. And then, the most devastating moment of the trial. Jasmine's mother took the stand. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke about the last time she saw her daughter alive. "She was my baby. My heart. And that man took her from me. He stole her future. He stole my world." Her voice broke. The courtroom was silent. Even the jurors looked away, blinking back emotion. It was a moment that no one would forget. Whitaker's lawyers tried everything. They painted Jasmine as unstable. She was struggling. She was emotional. Maybe she ran away and met the wrong person that night. They claimed there was no clear DNA evidence linking Whitaker directly to the crime. They said the surveillance footage didn't capture the murder, only her arrival. And in one final attempt to sway the jury, Pastor Whitaker took the stand himself. He looked at the jury. Tears in his eyes. "I have served God my entire life. I have dedicated myself to helping people. I loved Jasmine like a daughter. I would never hurt her." Some of his followers sobbed in the gallery. But the jury wasn't convinced. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom was so silent, you could hear a breath. The judge asked for the verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, how does the jury find? A pause. A heartbeat. And then, guilty. Gasps. Cries. Jasmine's mother collapsed into Marcus's arms. Pastor Whitaker didn't move. For the first time. The mask was gone. No more control. No more manipulation. No more power. Just a man in a suit, standing in front of the world as a convicted murderer. The judge delivered a life sentence. "You were trusted. You abused that trust. You took a young woman's life, and for that, you will spend the rest of yours behind bars." And just like that, it was over. Jasmine's family wept. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of justice. Because finally, the man who took Jasmine away would never hurt anyone again. Justice had been served. But no sentence could bring Jasmine back. And the truth? This case wasn't just about her. Because for years, Pastor Daniel Whitaker had been preying on others. For Evelyn Walker, life would never feel whole again. She had buried her youngest daughter. She still kept Jasmine's room exactly as it was, the books on her nightstand, the clothes folded in her drawers, the notes she had scribbled in her Bible. Some nights, she still picked up her phone, wanting to text Jasmine, before remembering she was gone. Her brother, Marcus, had changed, too. He had always been the protector. The one who was supposed to keep her safe. And now, all he could think about was the what-ifs. What if he had pushed harder when she started acting differently? What if he had been there that night? What if? The truth was, Jasmine was gone. And no amount of justice could bring her back. Jasmine's murder wasn't just a crime. It was a lesson. A terrifying and heartbreaking reminder that evil can wear the most trusted disguises. It can come in the form of a pastor, a mentor, a leader. Someone who smiles, speaks softly, and seems like they only want the best for you. But power corrupts. And some people use trust as a weapon. So, what can we learn from this? Trust your gut. If something feels off, if a person crosses boundaries, even in ways that seem small, listen to your instincts. Speak up. Jasmine tried to warn her friend, but she felt trapped, unsure if she was overreacting. No one should ever feel that way. Abuse isn't always physical. It can be emotional, spiritual, psychological. It can come in the form of manipulation, control, fear. And if someone is making you feel powerless, it's abuse. Jasmine's story is not just her story. There are countless others like her. And maybe, just maybe, if we pay attention, if we see the signs, if we act when something doesn't feel right, we can stop the next Jasmine before it's too late. Evil can wear the most trusted disguises. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts and speak up. If Jasmine had felt safe enough to speak up sooner, would she still be here? We'll never know. But maybe, just maybe, by telling her story, we can save someone else. What do you think about this case? Was justice served? Or do you think there's more to this story than we know? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more shocking true crime cases just like this one, cases that reveal the darkest corners of human nature, make sure you subscribe to Shocking True Crime Exposed. Hit the like button. Turn on your notifications. Because the world is full of stories like this one. And sometimes, the truth is even scarier than fiction.